In this series of videos I'm attempting to repair and restore a pair of HP9120A printers. In the previous two videos in this series we had a quick look inside one of the printers, and in the last video I dismantled this one into its major sub-assemblies and started cleaning it. So in this video we'll be looking at the print mechanism and dismantling that. But before we get into that, I just wanted to clean up the chassis and just go over a few minor points. The first thing is the rubber strip that normally sits on the bottom. This normally cushions the underside of the printer. This sits on top of the calculator, the HP9120A calculator, and this is intended to protect the paintwork and stop the printer moving around. But this has become petrified. It's supposed to be soft rubber, but it's rock hard, and obviously I need to replace it, so I'll be replacing that. Now, one of the questions I frequently get asked is what I use to clean things, and unfortunately, as anyone that makes YouTube videos will tell you, the YouTube platform is incredibly restrictive on what you're allowed to say, or at least within the context of certain declarations for a particular video. Because I want my videos to be as sort of generally accessible as possible, I have to declare each time I upload a video that there is nothing harmful or potentially dangerous or hazardous in the content, and that means I can't always say if I'm using something that could be construed as a dangerous chemical. So what I use varies tremendously. It depends on what I'm trying to clean. But I always start off with the most benign approach that I can. If, for example, I'm cleaning hard gold contacts, I don't use any chemicals or any abrasives. I just use a piece of clean kitchen towel. And if it's hard gold, then that should be sufficient. If you start using abrasives, you're just going to take the gold off. It's usually very thin, and although it might look very nice and shiny when you're finished, it will very quickly develop a layer of oxide or something on the surface and make it even worse. So generally speaking, it's whatever is the least aggressive. Now sometimes you need to go a bit more aggressive, so for these were bonded on, and it's kind of a rubberized bonding agent that they used, and also with things like the belt that disintegrated. So the belt that was on this completely dissolved almost, and all the rubber fell off onto the base, and it then kind of melts and dissolves and forms a sticky mess, which is very hard to clean off. This particular chassis so far I've just washed, so I can start off just with a bit of detergent, water, and then dry it. But then you've got to get off the more persistent things. Doesn't always matter. If you're just repairing it, you might not want to bother. But in this case I'm using a particular chemical. I can't tell you what it is because it's deemed to be a harmful chemical, and incidentally, anytime you are using chemicals you do need to be very careful with them. If you're not familiar with how to handle them, then just don't. As you're probably aware if you watch my videos, then I do have a set of extractors that are up here just out of line of sight, and so when I'm using chemicals I always have those running. They're nearly always running anyway. At the moment they're running but very slow. Normally I have them going full blast, but I need to turn them down so they don't make a lot of noise in the video. So this particular chemical is quite useful for this sort of thing because it will dissolve rubber and it will dissolve wax, so it's very easy for removing things like the residue of belts. So if you've got a sticky mess from an old belt that's dissolved, this is the ideal stuff to use. I apply it with a disposable pipette. You just put a small layer on there. This has been soaking for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I put it on just before I started recording this video. Use something that's really non-aggressive to the surface. I don't want to scratch up the plating on the chassis, but even so, this just would have cleaned this with isopropyl alcohol as well, and it just doesn't touch anything like this. It will just leave it where it is. But after just a few minutes you'll see that this will now just effectively slide off the chassis. There's going to be almost nothing left. Might take a couple of applications, but bring it a bit closer to the camera. even with just a very quick clean up there. Just apply a little bit more, bit of towel, and you'll see that it cleans up entirely. So one more coat after this, one more application, and it will clean up back to a very clean chassis without damaging the plating. Same with all the remnants of the belt, it will work the same with that. And also when you get things like this is kind of a tarry sticky mess from something that's spilt in here, and again for the same reason, it's kind of a waxy build-up that you get, and because this particular solvent will dissolve wax, you can put it on here, and despite again this having been cleaned with IPA, which had no effect on this whatsoever, after just 10 seconds or so you'll see that whatever that residue was has now completely gone. And if I just keep repeating this, you'll end up with a very clean chassis, and it'll get rid of all the sticky mess, all the old rubber, glue, everything. And as I said, it is a fairly aggressive chemical. It's deemed to be fairly dangerous, so you do need to be careful with it. But there's dozens of different things I use for cleaning depending on what I'm doing. So unfortunately, as I say, most of the time I can't actually tell you what it is, because otherwise my video would be pulled from YouTube. Okay, so I'll get this out of the way. I'll clean this off camera, but you can see the general principle is if you use the right cleaning agent, it's very easy and quick to clean up pretty much any sort of mess. Just try to avoid anything abrasive. Okay, so the next step in our restoration is to completely strip down the print mechanism. We're going to need to replace the roller and possibly several other parts. The belt will of course need to be replaced, but what we'll do first is completely strip this down into its component parts, find out exactly what work is required, and we will go from there. So we'll start off by removing the remnants of the paper reel holders. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is take off this top plastic cover. You need to be very careful with this. Quite often the screws will have kind of semi-bonded themselves to the plastic, so you need to support the plastic as you slacken them off. Otherwise what can happen is you can snap the plastic as it tries to twist round with the screw. Okay, now one of the interesting things with this printer, it does create a lot of fumes and smoke as it prints, or not a lot, but certainly you would see it if precautions weren't taken. And that's what this thing on the back here is. This is actually a vent, and part of the function of the motor is to circulate quite a lot of air. So this is part of a ducting system. Don't try and run the printer without this fitted. You'll get the material that's deposited on the print head everywhere if you run it with this completely removed. You see there's a large fan on this side. I mentioned in the previous video this is a very interesting motor, and you'll see that although outrunner motors are deemed to be very modern, used in sort of brushless applications, this is actually a very old outrunner motor. It's the rotor is on the outside. You can see that the stator is actually in the centre and the rotor runs around the outside. And bear in mind this goes back to the 1960s, so extremely clever. We'll just get this out of the way. Okay, so as you can see, a very interesting motor. Haven't tested it, hopefully it will be fine. Again, this is not the sort of motor I really want to have to rewind, but certainly seems alright. I can't see any signs of any damage, so we'll come back to that later. And now on to the more interesting part of this. What we have at the front of this is a sensor, and I need to take this off completely, so what I'm going to do is take the plate off that it's mounted to, and the PCB will come with that, so we can just get that out of the way and avoid damaging it. Okay, so that is just a sensor to detect the position of the roller, the print head in effect. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. What we have now, of course, is the print mechanism itself. What I'm going to do is take the end cheek off this side, and then we can start trying to tease the remaining parts out. I suspect it's going to be a bit of a fiddle getting this apart. It has completely kind of bonded itself together as the roller's disintegrated. I'm not going to try and turn this. There are some guide fingers under here that really we don't want to damage, so we need to make sure that we don't kind of ruin these, bend them, otherwise the print mechanism won't function anymore. So I'll get the screws out of the end of this and we'll see if we can start getting this thing apart. Okay, so that's the top screw taken out of the left hand side. What I should be able to do now is pull this across. There's a kind of a spiral plate in here, but that should come with this. Which it does. So it's all looking good. That bearing is very badly worn, so we'll need to do something about that. There's a roller bearing in here, but it feels really rough, so we'll need to probably replace that. Okay, the next thing we can do is take out the print head guide, bottom spacer, and the next thing is we can hopefully take out the roller itself. So we'll slacken off and remove this second screw, and then hopefully we can persuade the roller to come out. So in here there's supposed to be a rubber roller. As you can see, the paper's kind of stuck to it. There's a bit of paper that was left in here, but it's not part of the print head, that's just a piece of old paper. But you can see the roller has seen better days, so that's going to be a bit of a pain. So what we can do here is this will come off this assembly. It's kind of stuck to it at the moment. We'll come back to this. Might do an entire video on just this one part because it will take quite a bit of work to get that recovered. Actual fingers don't look too bad. There's a couple of bent ones, but not too bad. We'll now remove this. So I want to, in fact the screw's already loose, so I don't know what's going on there. Okay, so this is inside here. These contacts are used to ground the paper. The paper's got a metallic conductive coating on it, and the printing is formed when an arc is produced between the print head fingers. That's the very small fingers I showed in the previous video, and the surface of the coating on the paper. But of course the paper itself needs to be grounded. That's what these fingers are for. Okay, and then at the bottom we have the transverse motion roller. So this is a roller that's got a kind of a Z groove in it, or a spiral groove, and this is responsible for moving the print head back and forth across the paper. Okay. That's not looking too bad. There's a clutch arrangement down here that engages this or disengages it. That's looking fine. If that's the only piece that actually moves, and what this does, it just it's like a railroad points system. Decides where which of these grooves is open. Either the guide bar can run around just in a circle on this end one, or if this is pulled across, then it kind of releases the guide to follow the spiral, in which case it will follow the spiral all the way down to the far end, and then it reverses and it will follow the spiral all the way back, and usually end up back in the kind of resting position, which is just to keep going round in a circle. So it's kind of a clever system, but as I say, it works a bit like a railroad or train points system, and there's an electromagnet down here that energizes it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just finish taking this apart. I just need to release this, and I can just take out the last two screws. Okay, so that's the grounding plate and guide removed. It all looks to be in reasonably good condition. I can't see any issues. There's no sign of burning on the solenoid. The switch clicks, but I haven't tested it yet. Okay, well, it looks fine so far. And we're now left with just the bare chassis. So the next step is to get this cleaned. It's not too bad, just needs all the grime and dirt cleaning off it, and then we can start to very carefully reassemble this. We'll be fine, I think, up until the point when we get to the main platen roller. I think this is going to take a bit of restoring. Can at least turn it now. But the rest of it looks like it just needs cleaning and a bit of lubrication. There's no real severe wear I can see, and these will polish up extremely nicely. Okay, so in the next video we'll start working on this, work our way through, put it all back together, and see if we can get it freed up and rotating the way it needs to. I will of course need to fit a new belt so we can drive it properly from the motor, but the rest of it seems to be in extremely good condition. I can't see any cracks. All the inserts, the threaded inserts here, seem to be in good order. If they're not, you can actually replace them. They're kind of just stainless steel inserts, and the rest of it seems completely undamaged. So okay, good. So next video we'll start working on this and go through each part in turn and see what needs to be done to it.